Hi, everyone. So, as you know, I'm going to talk to you about mental health. I'm going to start by waking up a little bit with some statistics. Did you know that suicide is the biggest killer of men under 45 in the UK? Did you know that poor mental health costs the UK employers £45 billion every single year? And did you know that 1 in 15 junior lawyers in the UK have contemplated suicide in the last 14 days? Now, this is in the 21st century, which to me just blows my mind. But equally, this was pre-pandemic. So in my view, I actually think these statistics are probably going to get worse. So it's something that we need to address and we need to start talking about. But what's this got to do with lawyers? Well, we know from research and from statistics and from studies, in fact, Deloitte did a study last year showing the significant cost to employers. But what we've noticed is that lawyers suffer significantly lower levels of psychological and psychosomatic well-being than other professionals. Now, if you mix that with a global pandemic and add that to job security issues, then we've really got a serious issue for our profession. And we're noticing more and more so, especially in the UK, I work with a charity called Law Care. And the studies that we've conducted there, we've seen the impact on our profession. Because we are the go-to people. People expect us to know the answers. We're supposed to have the statistics at our fingertips. So what do we do about it? Well, I'm just going to share you a little story about my journey and why I care so much about mental health. And basically, I have anxiety. I've suffered with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I had a mental breakdown 2.5 years ago. And I talk openly about it now. I can talk to you here today. But, you know, that was a really, really difficult time. As a solicitor, I was, at the top of my game. I was the top performer. But ultimately, things just I couldn't cope anymore. I was on medication, I was having therapy, but I was in an environment that didn't support my mental health. I was in an environment where I couldn't thrive, where I couldn't be myself. And what that meant for me was I ended up having a long-term sickness absence. Now, I'd never had a sick day before, even with anxiety my whole life. I'd never had a sick day before, so that really irritated me. And I actually started to feel really guilty. I started to feel shame. I felt like I was letting people down. And for me, that was, I felt like I lost my sense of purpose. Being a solicitor and actually being able to support people and to help them gave me a sense of purpose. It actually helped me stay mentally well. So when I became too unwell, I decided that actually the best thing for me was to leave that job because the environment that I was going to go back to could potentially trigger another breakdown. And that was an incredibly difficult decision. I've trained my entire life to be a solicitor. I was in a great firm. But ultimately, I had to put my health first and I had to leave the environment that was causing some of the decline. So I took the view that leaving would help my recovery, and actually it did. I started to get better quite quickly once I knew I didn't have to go back there. So that was one thing. The other was that I engaged with therapy, and I spoke quite openly about it publicly and with my family, and gradually started to feel as though I could work again. But my issue was I couldn't find anywhere to go and work where they actually put mental health at the top of the agenda. I didn't want to go back into another melting pot like I'd just been in. So in a moment of madness, I decided to set up my own firm and create an environment that's positive for mental health, that has diversity and inclusion at the top of agendas for businesses and supports individuals when they actually do have a problem. So I'm very open with my team about my own anxieties. I can't believe I'm stood here talking to loads of people. If you'd have told me that 2 years ago, I definitely would not have believed you. And for me, that just shows that with the right environment, you really can thrive and you can recover. So it's important for businesses and law firms to create that environment, to have that as part of their culture. So when Thrive was born, we ended up winning loads of awards for all the work that we've been doing. And actually, that was within a year, and we've just been shortlisted again for the Law Society Excellence Awards for diversity and inclusion for the work that we're doing. And we've now been If anyone knows the Solicitors Regulation Authority, that's the UK regulatory body for solicitors. And they've actually put me as the only, and Thrive as the only small firm, there's firms like Clifford Chance on there, as equality and diversity mentors. So we're really proud to have made such amazing progress in such a short space of time. Like I say, it was only 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, that we set up. So why lawyers? Typically, there's a lot of lawyers in the room, presumably. We are high achievers, we're type A personalities, we are competitive, we want to be the best. And often that leads to issues when it comes to stress, because actually we'll work those longer hours. We'll go and do those extra bits for our clients because we want to be the best. And so naturally our personalities attract stress. And actually often we are the strong ones, and we ultimately don't open up when we really need to. So hands, I can't actually see everyone, but hands in the air, anyone here who's ever felt stressed before? Everyone should put their hand up. Yeah, okay. So, we've all felt stressed, haven't we? Everybody's felt stressed. Now, stress is good. Stress is part of mental health. We're supposed to feel a bit of stress. That gets us going, right? But where we don't manage stress, or where stress becomes excessive and persistent, what we find is that's when mental health starts to decline into mental ill health. So it's really important that we make that distinction. And as lawyers, that's partly our responsibility to acknowledge when we're feeling stressed, when we're struggling, and what some of those signs are. And that's something I didn't know back then, and hopefully by sharing some of my story, people can then start to see that in themselves and in their team. And as we know, mental health doesn't discriminate. Mental ill health doesn't discriminate. We are in a world now where everything's uncertain. We are impacted very differently in our respective countries, in our respective businesses, by the pandemic, by loss of potential jobs, financial insecurity, and it really does have a profound impact on our mental health. But one thing that I'm a huge advocate for physical exercise to promote my own mental well-being. And now I don't take any medication or have any therapy, but I exercise every single day. So even when we've been here, I've been like, right, I need to go for a really long walk. And that for me works. So it's finding something that works for you, that works for your team if you are encouraging them to promote self-care and positive well-being. So we all know about the benefits of obviously exercising and physical health, and we all are very conscious to look after our physical health, aren't we? That's something that, we all know how to do. But what about our mental health? How about if I call it brain health? We as lawyers use our brains as tools. That is how we do our job. We need our brains to be at optimum performance for us to thrive in the workplace and for us to deliver for our clients. So if we reframe this as brain health, surely that should put it right to the top of the agenda. So I've talked briefly about some of the triggers, and I know for many individuals, not just in the UK, but across the globe, we've seen so many triggers from coronavirus and lockdown. In fact, I think today the UK is going into a second lockdown, I hear on the grapevine. Yay. So, there are all of these uncertainties. We're all being asked to work from home again. These all cause significant problems for people's mental health. And a lot of the time, it isn't what happens at work. It could be that someone's lost a loved one, that they've got to care for their children or their elderly parents. They might have lack of sleep because of a baby. There's so many different things that we as employers don't always know, because we're not actually seeing the personal impact on people's mental health. And on Twitter last week, it was only, I think there was a couple of different organisations actually tweeting about the fact that this is called the other epidemic. And it's because right now, this is a huge problem. We're losing so many people to suicide. We are not talking about mental health as much as we should do, and it's getting lost behind this global pandemic that we're in. So it's something that we really need to bring to the forefront of business agenda and our own minds. So what have I been doing about it? Well, I set up a petition. When I launched Thrive Law, I decided that launching a firm and creating an environment for me is probably a bit selfish, so that was only for me. So how am I going to help other people? And I took the view that the only way to help other people was to get the government to support businesses. and to get them to basically support them with mental health risk assessments. I'll just explain a little bit what I mean by that, 'cause most people I speak to in the UK have never heard about these. But in the UK, it's mandatory to conduct a stress risk assessment. It's not mandatory to do a mental health or well-being risk assessment. And as I said before, some stress is good, but the stress risk assessments don't cover the more holistic side of being mentally unwell at work, like all the personal stuff and all the other things. It only focuses on the stress in the role. So in my view, that's not sufficient enough for us as employers to fully understand exactly how we can support our staff. So what I'm calling on the UK government to do is to effectively support businesses in two ways. The first way is to support businesses using technology to access all of the resources that they have in the organisation. So that risk assessment will effectively identify if you have any EAP programs, counselling, whatever resources you as a business have, doing an annual assessment on who's using it, is it working, do people know where to get that? You know, we're working in a different remote world now. So do your staff know how to access those resources that you might have in place, and are they even using them? So this annual risk assessment will bring it to the top of the agenda, and what we want the UK government to do is basically support with that process, because most businesses do care, but quite frankly, they don't know where to start. The second thing that I want the UK government to do is to support employers in assessing individuals, so assessing that individual risk. What adjustments can they put in place? In the UK, disability could be something like anxiety or depression. So we're protected under the Equality Act. And what that means in the UK is that we actually have an obligation as employers to put things in place to avoid discrimination claims. But we also have the human angle of actually caring for our staff. We know that the key to every successful business is in looking after the people. So by combining these two approaches, I believe that we can really start to understand this and support the needs of our individuals in our workplace. So we'll see where we get with it. We've got a few signatures on there. So in terms of the tech that we use, I'm not going to go into loads of detail about the tech, because you guys will all have the bits that you use. But one thing that we found that was really difficult when we were in lockdown was the fact that we didn't have that office communication. When we're talking about a case, we couldn't chat about a case. We couldn't have the same conversations that you just have by the water cooler in the office. And that was actually proving quite difficult, because it meant that we were increasing the use of emails. It meant that we were increasing the amount of time on the phone. And so we were being less productive. So we spotted that relatively quickly. And we actually decided unconventionally to use WhatsApp and use voice notes. And what I did was, rather than just assuming what my staff needed, I asked them the question. My staff were all relatively junior and they needed some support from me, but I couldn't be on the phone to them 12 hours a day. So we had to find something that fit for us. So, you know, ask your team, how do they want to be communicated with? How often? Some of my team don't want to be on video calls every day. Death by Zoom calls. No one wants to be on a Zoom call every day. So find other methods of communication, and it can really support mental well-being of your team, because not only do they feel like you've heard what they need, but you're communicating with them in a way that's positive to their mental health. I personally don't like being on a video call all day. I'm not used to being behind a desk all day. So for me, that was something I voiced to my team. And actually, they agreed with me. So we decided we'll only do video calls once a week. So one of the other ways that we used tech was for our own mental health risk assessments. We found a company, and by the way, I'm not affiliated to any of these companies, it's just who we use. But Champion Health were a company that did mental health risk assessments. I was like, yes, I found some tech that does it. Because, you know, we at Thrive didn't have the knowledge or the resources to create our own wellbeing risk assessments using tech. So we tried to find a company who did. And the reason we love Champion Health was that they did a report for the employer telling us exactly what we needed to do, the 3 key areas that we needed to work on as a business to support our staff. So, you know, I always use the analogy that business is as lovely as having a yoga session and free fruit every Friday. How do we know that our staff aren't flexible or already eating enough fruit? You know, you need to, if you're going to spend money on well-being, do it in an area that they really need that support, and actually it'll have a better impact. So it's a better investment for the business. The other thing that we found with Champion Health was they actually gave a report to the individual. So the whole thing is anonymous. So they were really, really open because of the use of tech, which I loved. And it took a lot of time off me. I'm a small business owner. I'm the only director and shareholder. So it was all on me to do all of this. So it took all of that away. And they got an individual report. Now, that report was so helpful because it gave the employee a personal, bespoke report on what they need to do to support their own well-being. And I love that. I love that shift in the onus of the responsibility. You know, you've got to have some from the employer, but also we have our own obligations and responsibilities to look after our mental well-being. And finally, I'm going ahead. And finally, we created our own well-being platform during lockdown, called Thrive Wellbeing. And the idea behind Thrive Wellbeing was that people could continue to have that conversation. They could have training on stress, different mental health illnesses, and also provide them with toolkits, guides, and support. So we actually, first of all, created it for our team, but now we've rolled it out to all of our clients, because what we found people needed was ongoing support that they could access at their own pace, rather than obviously in, most sessions would be all in person where we're all sat in a room. We can't do that anymore. And if someone does have a mental health problem, they don't necessarily want to be in a training session with their colleagues if they haven't disclosed that. So giving them access to that anywhere, on any device, at any time, over a 12-month period meant they could do it at their own pace. So we've just, like I say, we've just launched Thrive Wellbeing only last month. So my final thoughts really are around leaders and the fact that we've seen that leadership is a key influence for workplace health management and organisational well-being, but 75% of line managers feel responsible for employee well-being but don't have the tools to do that. So again, things like ongoing support for your managers, making sure managers know how to have those conversations. Do they understand how to approach it? Do they even know what to say? If somebody came out and told them they were depressed or feeling suicidal, would they know what to do with that information? So you as a business owner need to obviously consider the needs of these people who are ultimately on the front line supporting your staff on a day-to-day basis. But we know we're living in a very disconnected world. Even though we're connected using tech, we're not seeing the social signs, we're not seeing the behavioral signs that we used to see in the workplace. So we do need to upskill our managers and train them on how to spot some of these things remotely. But also, like I say, conducting those risk assessments can really support not only the individuals who need the support, but your managers in identifying how to give that support to each individual. So have a think about what you can do when you go back to your organisation, even if it's just one thing. Thank you.